Ready.
We are calling to order this meeting of the Richfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority at 7 p.m. on June 15th. And our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the special concurrent HRA and City Council work session of May 12th, 2015, the regular HRA meeting of May 18th, 2015, and the special concurrent HRA and City Council meeting of May 26th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
All right, are there any additions, corrections, or changes? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we have approved the minutes. The next item on our agenda is approval of the actual agenda. So,
I would have moved that we approve the agenda.
Second.
okay, are there any discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we've approved the agenda. Okay, the third item on our agenda is consideration of a resolution authorizing the HRA to affirm the monetary limits on municipal tort liability established by Minnesota Statutes 466.04. Mr. Devich.
Thank you, Chair Supple, members of the HRA. This is a pretty simple and rudimentary process. The HRA, like the City of Richfield, purchases our insurance from the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust. And each year, the HRA and the city both have to affirm by July 1st whether they're going to stand by the statutory limits set forth for a city or a housing redevelopment authority or exceed them. And we have always historically stood by the statutory limits. And those limits are $500,000 for an individual claim and $1.5 million for an occurrence. If an organization were to set those limits aside, then they would have to purchase, to the extent they purchased insurance over and above those amounts, then the city or the HRA or whatever public entity would be liable up to those amounts. So, as the Minnesota statute set the limit at $500,000 and $1.5 million, we go along with it, as do most cities in Minnesota.
All right, Commissioner Elliott.
Just a couple questions. Can you just briefly describe for me what sort of liability or potential liabilities the HRA has that requires the insurance?
Well, I suppose, let's say that we had an HRA. I'm just going to pick one out of the sky that kind of hits my. Let's say you had an HRA property, and there was some hazard on the property, like a pool or something happened on the property. There were some kids playing on it, and they got hurt, badly hurt, and the people would go after the Housing Redevelopment Authority on a claim, probably in a situation like that. That's one I can think of.
And in that circumstance, and that's, like you say, being separate entities and autonomous to a certain extent from the city, so both would get sued, but presuming one would tender to the other, and we'd end up with only one liability, correct?
That would be my assumption.
And another question I've got is, I'm just curious, because of the nature of the entity and its functions, and I'm assuming the League of Minnesota and the Insurance Trust have been writing policies like this for a long time. I'm wondering, do we have an actual written policy from the League of Minnesota Cities that covers the HRA?
Absolutely.
Because I'm curious, I'm just curious of the definition of an occurrence and what defines it and how the coverage is established. I can, if we've got it, I can just get a copy of it and look it up myself. I don't want to get into it, but.
Sure.
And then the other thing is, I know that they were talking about are we mandated to carry the insurance, the HRA?
Well, are you mandated to carry the insurance? I don't know that you're mandated. I mean, you have to assume the risk one way or the other. We do have a self-insurance fund, but that's a city self-insurance fund, and the HRA does not have a self-insurance fund. So I'm not aware of any other way that the HRA could really assume the risk, other than putting the, well, and that wouldn't even, I was going to say, other than putting the entire tax levy on jeopardy if we had to follow through and pay off on a claim, because the levy is so limited for an HRA that it might take you years and years and years to even levy enough money if you took every penny of your levy towards paying off a claim.
And I hope you don't mind, I'm trying to educate myself a little bit more than anything else, but I did see that we can purchase excess insurance. It's what, $6,000 for excess, for $1 million excess, and I understand that. But what I don't understand is when we look at this and in the staff report, I'm trying to think of a circumstance if we purchase the insurance from the League of Minnesota Cities, how or under what circumstances the HRA would feel that a single claimant should receive more than the $500,000 limit, and we can authorize that. I'm thinking, pretty cold day, where, I'm just trying to figure out what the circumstances were, that if we purchase the insurance and we've got the ability to get excess, somehow we're going to unilaterally make a decision that $500,000 isn't enough for a single claimant. We're going to give them more money, and where's that money going to come from?
Well, okay, so let me go back to, okay, so let's just say that that the HRA in this instance went against my recommendation, and you said, heck no, we're going to waive our limits of liability. And Mr. Devich, because we're waiving those limits of liability, you go out and buy excess liability coverage to the extent of $1 or $2 million, whatever they would do. I don't know if they'll do more than $1 million or not through the league, but let's say $1 million. All right, so if a claim occurred, the way the claim would be handled would be pretty much the same way. The League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust would handle the claim for us. They would assign an adjuster and attorneys, et cetera, to handle the claim for us. But because you waived your limits and because you bought more insurance than the statute says that you have to have, then your limit is whatever your coverage is. And to the extent that a court might award that, you have to pay it. And so, to my knowledge, there's never been a court case in Minnesota where someone has been awarded by against a municipality or housing redevelopment authority more than the statutory limit of liability. And the only time that would ever happen is if you purchase more insurance than your liability limits, and then someone pursued a claim in court and the court awarded it.
Okay, last question. For the basic $500,000 single claimant, $1.5 million occurrence, what are we paying?
Off the top of my head, I don't know if it's not in the report.
I didn't see it.
No, it's not in the report. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I don't know. I can find that out easily enough. That probably in the future should be in the report.
One last question. I said this before, but
yeah.
Is there another source for that type of insurance other than the League of Minnesota Cities?
Sure, you could go out and we over the years have looked many times at other coverage, but no one can come close to the League of Minnesota Cities. And the League of Minnesota Cities, depending upon your experience, at the end of a year, will issue dividends back. Over the past many years, both the HRA and the city have been fortunate enough to get year-end dividends, because they don't, it's kind of like, it's not a non-for-profit like an insurance company would be. So they share the profits back with the folks who buy coverage from them. Okay. So in reality, there's nobody that's going to give us coverage that's anywhere near what we get from the league.
And I would just add that I can't recall whether it was through the city or through the HRA, but we have had instances in the past. We're talking about property liabilities is what a lot of the discussions have been, but there have been other kinds of liabilities in the Best Buy Walzer lawsuit. There were a number of lawsuits against both the city and the HRA, whether it's that or property. What the league brings to the table also, they have in-house attorneys that come in that deal specifically with city and HRA types of issues. And so they have a level of expertise that goes beyond even what our attorneys have.
Yeah, I've had cases with and against the League of Minnesota Cities, so I know the council's good. Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, as I was reading this, wondering why would someone want to waive this? Is there a reason that people do it from time to time?
Sure. I mean, some cities might think that this is not an adequate enough coverage, and might decide that they will go out and pay the extra money to buy an extra $1 million, and if that happens to one of their constituents, there's that coverage sitting there. You know, it's one of those policy kind of things. I always think, at least from my own perspective, that the state of Minnesota has over the past years raised this limit quite a bit. In the past 10 years, it's gone up quite a bit. And the legislature looks at it, and, I have a firm belief, I think it should be something that is consistent across the state. And to that end, I'm glad there is a statute that protects cities to some extent, and it'd be nice if most cities would follow it.
Commissioner Gepner?
I have a question. So would the amount that was paid to the League of American Cities show up on claims and payroll at some point in time, which I don't remember seeing?
Sure, I mean, it would have to, because if it's paid, it's gotta be in claims and payroll somewhere. Yeah. Right.
Under a different name, anonymous name?
You might LMCIT
Yeah.
or something like that. It's gotta be in there. Yeah, it would have to be. If it's a payment that we've made.
Yeah.
Or that you were looking for in the past, I don't know.
But it would be a single annual
Yeah.
payment.
Payment.
And, based on the due date, you probably see it next month.
I think
my
they come
guess.
up I think it comes up in July each year.
All right, are there any further questions? Is someone wanting to make the motion?
I move that we adopt this resolution.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of adopting a resolution authorizing the HRA to affirm the monetary limits on municipal tort liability established by Minnesota Statutes 466.04, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, we've adopted the resolution. Okay, moving on to item number 4, which is consideration of a market rate housing policy to assist in guiding future multifamily housing development in the city of Richfield. Mr. Devich.
Thank you, Chair Supple. This item, which of course is the multi-rate housing policy that we talked about a few meetings ago, and we had some suggestions that were given by the HRA. And so we went back and now are coming back with the policy, and I'm going to ask Community Development Director John Stark to make this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Supple. This is probably going to be familiar to you. This is the third of 3 studies that are very similar. Just by way of background, several years ago, in February 2013, the HRA appointed 15 people to serve on a housing visioning task force to come up with some broad vision statements, goals regarding housing. And that group did finish that work. That broad vision and goals documents was approved by the HRA and by the City Council both. One of the pieces of feedback we got from that is that, they were at the 10,000-foot level, which you'd want to see in those kinds of statements, but that there was a desire to see a little bit more definition to it, a little bit more guidance. So then from there, we've been gathering a subset of those 15 people, a smaller group of 5 or 6 people, to continue to meet to develop a comprehensive housing policy for the HRA and City Council. Policy statements have been provided to you and approved by you on both senior housing and affordable housing. This third piece is on market rate housing.
Chair.
The task force has been meeting this spring to discuss multifamily housing development projects and has come up with a policy statement regarding market rate housing. And I am just going to read through it really briefly. When considering proposals for market rate multifamily housing, the HRA and city shall give priority to projects that address one or more of the following criteria. Number 1, Rather than being located in single-family residential neighborhoods, projects should be located in areas near commercial and retail uses. Number 2, projects that have a complementary size and style to the community, and that'd be a preference for projects limited to no more than 4 stories, such as townhomes, twin homes, and garden homes, and the consideration of high-rise developments only in places like the 494 corridor or in the downtown area at the lakes at Lindale. Number 3, projects that would include a mix of unit sizes and amenities, offering options for all stages of life and families, including young professionals, retirees, and larger families. Number 4, include amenities to build community and encourage active lifestyles such as communal gathering spaces, both indoors and out, inclusivity of pets and space to accommodate pets, access to trails and parks, transportation amenities such as van or car share, electric car charging capability, bike share, airport shuttle, or located near public transit, bicycle-friendly amenities, workout facilities to encourage wellness, green space for community gardens, and designated spaces for outdoor cooking and barbecue. Number 5, projects that are mixed use and include retail or commercial areas desired by the community. Number 6, projects that embody and preserve the feel of the urban hometown in their design, layout, and interactions with the community. And number 7, projects that offer flexibility in their design to accommodate market changes between the rental and ownership market and future housing needs. So how we anticipate using this is a couple of things. One is, as developers come in, depending on what kind of housing they're proposing, we're going to hand them these guidelines. When their proposals come to you for funding or for any other approvals that the HRA would typically give, we will remind you of these housing policies. In the staff report, we will touch on them, how they're being met or not met. They are more or less guidelines at this point, but I think that, for example, much of what you do, as opposed to maybe the city council, is very discretionary. You know, when you provide tax increment financing, well, there's no requirement for you to do so. And, you know, as you go through these guidelines, if you feel a developer is not adhering to those or not making an adequate attempt, you know, you can make policy financially by how much TIF or other assistance you're going to give, or other approvals that you might give. And it might just be a way to leverage what the community is looking for. I also see this probably being incorporated into the comprehensive plan update that would come out in a couple of years. So with that, I would, any questions you might have?
All right, Commissioner Gotel.
First of all, I want to say that I really like a lot of the language that talks about how apartment buildings or other types of multi-story buildings fit into neighborhoods. That with all we have been through with Edina, I want to thank the folks for being so sensitive, and I think that you got that right. You got that language really right. And I have reviewed this, and I just, you know, it's one of these things where, oh my gosh, I wish I would have said this before. When I'm looking at the mixed rate, market rate, the one thing that I look at the affordability policy and then look at the market rate housing. What one of them does not say is that mixed market rate with affordable units, like we do with inclusionary housing, and we somehow miss that. And because a lot of times we ask developers that they can't put 20% affordable in, so that we scatter it, which is what we want to do because that's in our affordability. But it would be more specific language, and that's just one of the things that I thought. And then I'll finish up, and I'll Commissioner Rubenstein, just going back down to the senior housing again one more time about the statement regarding Cedar Point 2, being that we're going to soon have a development on there that kind of makes this moot. Perhaps we should strike it. Thought.
All right, Commissioner Rubenstein.
First of all, I'd like to thank Commissioner Gotel for beating me to the punch on that issue. You and me both. I would like to bring to the HRA's attention the second bullet under number 2, a consideration of high-rise developments along the I-494 corridor or in the downtown area near Lindale Avenue and 66th Street. 2 things regarding that point.
In the last visioning exercise that the city went through, which was quite a few years ago, in fact, I believe it was called Visions 2015. So it's time for a review, for another visioning.
Vision's 2020.
It was 2020? Okay. I participated in the housing subcommittee on that visioning thing. And one of the points that was brought up very, very rigorously was to not put any more high-rises in downtown Richfield. That City Bella, Gramercy, et cetera, are not conducive to forming community with the larger part of Richfield, and also it is not part, it doesn't make one have that hometown feel about it. As I recall, about 2-3 years ago, a friend of mine was in from out of town, and we were driving down 66th Street East and hit the corner, the light at 66th and Lyndale, and he turned to me and said, "Who approved that mistake?" I told him what had happened, nevertheless, not in too great detail. But I do believe that this pointing out 66th and Lyndale as a place where high-rises should be considered is not what had been put in that visioning statement. So we've got a conflict here. If somebody were to come and say, want to build on the corner, you know, of the parking lot of where Lakeshore is right now, where Champs is or something, or perhaps tear down one of the strip malls across from the liquor store or something like that and put up a high-rise. This is not conducive to the neighboring neighborhoods. So I have a problem with that. Otherwise, I think it's good. There's one other point, and that was, this one is a bit vague in its working, and it says here, number 5, projects that are mixed use and include retail or commercial uses desired by the community. That's sort of vague wording, and some parts, as we can see, like for the Banshills, some parts of the community are very excited about them, and other parts are totally opposed. And how do we determine what kind of commercial uses? Right now, those kinds of things coming into neighborhoods have very little oversight by the HRA. That's more of a council oversight. And yes, this may be something that council will use as well, but right now I think the wording is a bit vague or unrealistic.
I also had a couple of questions, if everybody else has had a chance to speak. The first one is very minor, but in the title, is there a reason that multifamily was left out? Because I was thinking of somebody scanning our policies from the public and looking at things. Because in the first line, it talks about market rate multifamily housing, which is what the policy is about, but the title simply says market rate policy. So I was just wondering if there was a reason that was left out?
Yeah, actually, I think when we started this, the intent was that it was not going to be focused solely on multifamily. The intent was going to be market rate housing, period. You know, as it is with groups, you know, sometimes the group goes, as a life of its own, goes in a different direction. And how it turned out, there was really very little, if any, discussion on single-family market rate housing. And so the conversation just morphed over time. So I think it would be fine to change the title based on these items to say market rate multifamily housing policy.
All right. Secondly, I was very pleased to see in the first bullet when they said it was a transition, because I don't want to ever have a situation where something's off by itself. And I know over the years people have had concerns about feeling like this 494 strip is kind of off by itself from the rest of the community. And so I do believe it should be a transition, and I'm very pleased with that wording because it needs to be part of the community. My third point gets back to something that's in all the other statements, but it's not in this one. If you go back to the vision statement for the overall policy, housing policy, one of the things is avoidance of concentrations of housing of any type. And if you look on the affordable housing policy in the second bullet, it talks about that. If you look at the senior housing policy, where it's bullet 3, it talks about that geographical balance. I'm wondering if we need to add something between the second and third bullets, saying that, I don't know, perhaps consideration should also be given to geographical balance of market rate housing, especially in areas described in areas 1 and 2 where it's lacking. Because just as we shouldn't have concentrations of poverty, I don't think we should have concentrations of affluence. I think it's good to have mixtures all over the place, and I don't want to get into a situation of where there's like a gated community and that's where all the rich people live. Or it's not healthy for a community. I think we need to have everybody working together, and I guess that would be the concern I have, that we need to look at geographical balance. And I was pleased at some of the things over by I'm losing the Cedar Park 2 redevelopment had consideration of some more market rate on that side of town, because it seems like along that Cedar Strip there's an abundance of affordable housing, and I don't want to get into a case where it's only next to Edina that we have our market rate housing. I want to have it all over the whole community.
And I had one more thought, just thinking about this a little bit further. We talk about the market rate multifamily housing, and so we didn't talk about the family homes. Are we going to go back and talk about single family homes as a housing policy?
To be honest, I'm not sure that we need to. I think that what we do with single family housing has seemed to just work well. We certainly could.
The only thing I think about it addressing possibility of some of the pocket neighborhood kinds of developments I see, where there's one level living in those kinds of things, which are still single family dwellings and townhomes and stuff like this. We might want to look at that just to see if there are some nuances that we want to address.
Okay. Well, part of that, I have to see how willing the 5 or 6 people are to continue the process.
Oh, they're
too.
doing really good. I mean,
They
I
are.
really like what's coming out of here. Congratulations on this great work.
Yes, please thank them for us.
Make sure we give them certificates or do something and bring them in to congratulate. I mean, they've been sticking this out for a long time, and we're getting some good policy out.
Commissioner Elliott?
I'm not certain that I wouldn't be, if I was a developer, somewhat uncomfortable on and understanding their guidelines, but I'm trying to wrap around taking market rate housing and market rate housing here is going to go up where you've got a lot. And you may have townhouses. There may be enough area to do townhouse to have an economic return on it. And I understand what Chairperson Supple is saying, but the affordable housing and the senior housing is a separate market that by all definition should be integrated. I think you just leave market rate housing alone. It's going to happen, and things are, and HRA and the City Council is going to take affordable housing and combine that. And I was going to mention that on the affordable housing, they do address that contain a mix of market rate and affordable units with a higher proportion of market rate units is what we're doing now. That's the 80-20, and I don't know that we want to park that in the market rate and saying also there'll be an affordable component of that on everyone, because then this states what we're going to do if somebody comes in or we're asking why is there no affordable housing combined with your program. But we've got to state in one. I think if we put in 2 places, there's going to be a conflict between them just in which side do they go to. But I think the market rate takes care of itself, and I think the HRAs with the lots and the houses are going up is about what we're going to get in terms of market rate single-family residences. And I think we're doing a really good job. And I always get worried about too many guidelines. I think that this is articulate and well stated, and if you combine that with the other 2 we've already done, I think we're pretty well set in having our policies and our understandings out there established in guidelines, and I think we're in pretty good position moving forward.
Yeah, just may I make a follow-up on that, because I was the one who brought this, just a follow-up to our conversation. I just know that there's been some problems in some neighborhoods with some of these new kinds of dwellings and would be considered single-family homes, pocket neighborhoods, one-level living places and everything. And it might behoove us at least to take a look at it and see what the issues have been on those. That's why I'm concerned about that. Some of them have gone very well and some of them have not.
Yeah.
For various reasons of ownership associations, all kinds of things, in neighborhoods, so.
Commissioner Gepner?
I don't think we have to worry about Richfield being a rich ghetto. Also the density that multi-housing can provide, I think, is a good thing for the community. And I think we're all going to have to live closer to each other, and I don't want to see it discouraged anywhere in Richfield. And so if somebody has an opportunity in a certain area, I think they should be allowed to come before the various commissions and state their case, and let's not dissuade them by some kind of policy.
But don't you think that there's excuse me, Commissioner, don't you think that there's an issue between putting a 10-story building against a single-family home?
Well, I don't think it'll fly with the planning commission and.
Well, that's
and-
what, and this tells the picture that that's our policy. It helps them to not come forward with it in the first place and gives our developers a time to come up with something that will work. I'm with you, they can come and bring us anything, but it would be nice if if we gave them some guidance ahead so they don't spend a ton of money and time developing something that's really not gonna fly.
All right, Commissioner Rubenstein?
As I think back several years ago, this whole exercise of putting together different parts of housing policies came about because we didn't have it, and there was a developer who plainly asked, well, what is your housing policy? And we didn't have it. And so to make it comprehensive, we really do have to have something at least minimally about single-family housing, in my opinion. Otherwise, it's not comprehensive.
All right. At this point, you are looking for guidance for us as to whether we're going to adopt this or go back and make revisions, or what are you looking for at this point?
Well, I think I heard enough direction on most of the topics. There's consensus. I think the one that maybe I didn't hear the consensus on was whether or not high-rise development should be considered at a couple of locations or not. We can go back and look at the Visions 2020 policy. I can tell you, that's the nature of policies. The newest policy just trumps what came before it. 2020 is stale. I don't know that staff refers to it anymore, to be honest.
Well, it's a shame if you don't,
But
because we were adamant about not having
But things
more
change.
high
Right,
rises.
but things change and evolve, and that's why we went through this process now.
Yeah.
And in 5 or 6 years, I don't doubt that another HRA might look at these policies and say, these are outdated. Our thinking has changed on those, and we say this in the staff report, that probably these are only good for 5 or 6 years before you want to revisit them. But whatever the HRA's direction is, for example, on the high-rise nature at those locations, we will change in this. And then come back to you. I guess my preference would be to just, again, other than that one issue, I think I did hear consensus. So to just give us our marching orders to make changes the way we heard them. We'll put this back together in a full document and distribute it with a memo that wouldn't require any further action on your part. If you got the memo, if you got the document, and you said, well, no, this isn't what we want to do at all, we could revisit it.
I'd like to revisit it with
Do you want
with
to,
the
we can
change.
table it.
We can
it to
table
the
it.
next meeting.
Okay.
And it'll come back that way. I'll make a motion then to table the market rate housing policy to assist in guiding future multifamily housing development in the city of Richfield in such time that the staff makes the corrections that we've asked for and can bring it back to the HRA.
And could I ask, what correction did you ask for on the high-rise housing?
We didn't ask for, I don't think there was consensus about
Yeah.
that, but that you would go back and see what the Vision 2020 and bring that back to us. And we might be able to have a discussion then and move it forward.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of tabling?
Can we discuss it?
You cannot
Discuss
discuss
a
a
process.
motion to table something.
Mhm.
So
So no.
we have to vote, so no, you can't. So all in favor of tabling it, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
I oppose.
All right, it has been tabled until the next meeting. Moving on to number 5, the HRA discussion items. Are there any items that the body would like to discuss?
Could I do good and welfare?
All right, Commissioner Rubenstein, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to offer one item for good and welfare. Many people already know that our chair, Mary Supple, was recently honored by the Minnesota DFL Women and inducted into their Hall of Fame. Although this is a nonpartisan group here, the HRA, nevertheless, such an honor deserves recognition. Congratulations.
Thank you. Are there other items for discussion? I did have one question. Could you tell us what the progress is on the city garage site? When I'm driving by, it doesn't seem like anything is happening. I was just wondering when you anticipate something to start happening, or?
Yeah, the developer has lapsed on all of their agreements with us.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we had asked them to give to give us a statement to pass along to you in an email. I've asked for that several times. It just hasn't been forthcoming. I was hoping that the developer could, I don't ever like to deliver somebody else's news for them. Something always gets lost in translation. I was hoping they could deliver their own news in their own way, but that didn't happen. I can tell you that the conclusion that they came to is they could not make that. They were proposing 45 units. They couldn't make 45 units work financially. Then they came back to us and said, well, could we just do something with 70 units or some other number? And our answer was, you can, but we think you'd have to go back to the HRA and city council again to start the process. We wouldn't feel comfortable just crossing out 45 and changing it to 70. And it's been quite some time since we've heard from them. To be honest, with Cedar Point 2, as a staff, we're at capacity. So really, we've been kind of passively marketing this site. And I don't anticipate that changing until we've kind of made some more progress on Cedar Point 2. And maybe this fall then, we would go through a request for proposal process.
All right, thank you. Are there any other discussion items? All right, then we will move along to the executive director report.
Yes, Chair, Supple, members of the HRA, the only report I would make is that this past weekend, Minnesota legislature included in their bonding bill $10 million designated for Richfield 77th Street underpass that was signed by the governor Saturday afternoon. And I'm just putting together a process here to see how quickly we can start moving along on the project now that we know we've got $10 more million. That's in addition to the $2.5 million that we got last year, and in hopes that we'll get more money going forward. But this is a huge, huge, huge step to making this project become a reality, and it's very exciting.
Can we thank our legislators for that?
Yes,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
certainly. And we'll
I
be
have
writing.
personally already, but we'll send out a
Yeah.
formal thank you.
So,
And let's, beside our legislators, be sure not to forget Paul Thiessen.
Yes.
Paul Thiessen was extremely instrumental in making this happen as well,
Yeah. Mhm.
And-
along with our legislators.
what's the estimate on the cost of that project?
Well, the entire cost of the project probably is somewhere around 21 million, perhaps. And, I guess it's hard to tell till we get going, because a big piece of that is we don't know exactly how much the acquisition piece of it's going to be. I think it's we're confident that engineering design is going to be under the 2.5 million. We have to complete that. Interestingly enough, the money that we got in the 10 million includes the ability for the city of Richfield to use it for acquisition and construction.
Oh, okay.
That is extraordinary
There, yeah.
and extraordinarily good for Richfield.
All
Good news.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the claims and payroll.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the claims and payroll. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, seeing no further business, the meeting is adjourned.